Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be talking about this thing, which is the ZimaBoard, which is kind of weird, but really cool. Let's get into it. All right, so the ZimaBoard is definitely not new if you've been in the self-hosting space or tinkering space, whatever this space is called, but it's my first time checking it out and I thought I'd talk about it. If you've watched the channel for a while, you probably know that I don't really do reviews. Typically when a company reaches out and wants me to cover one of their products, I let them know I don't do reviews, but I will gladly use it in a interesting way if I think I can, find something. So like, for example, when Minis Forum reached out about their UM690, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do a review on this, but there's a lot of horsepower in that thing, and it could be really cool to set up something like that as a dedicated video editing server, for example. So I did that. Same with the Seed Studio Odyssey. I was like, man, this thing's a fun tinkering project kind of thing, and I thought it would be fun to make a goofy router, so I did. So that's normally what I do. I don't normally do reviews, and this isn't really a review, but this isn't really like a specific project. This really is just me sort of talking about the ZimaBoard. And that's because I just found this thing to be so dang interesting. I originally, when they first reached out and I kind of looked it up, I wasn't that interested because to me, I didn't quite get it. It didn't really make sense. It seemed like a product for an audience that doesn't exist because it's a little bit more expensive than mini PCs that are kind of faster. And it's a little bit simpler than even something just like an older used desktop if you want to be able to add in PCIe cards. And we'll talk about that in a bit, but I didn't quite get it, but now I do, and I'm actually a really big fan. So I wanted to talk about it and talk about how I've kind of put it to use and some of my future plans for this, actually two ZimaBoards. I have this one, and then I have one running back there that I'll talk about in a bit. But for now, I'd like to talk about the specs on this thing. This one has an Intel Celeron N3450. There is the lowest tier version of this has an Intel 3350, I think is what it is, but this is a 4-core 4-thread, and the cheapest version has a 2-core 2-thread. And there's actually 3 SKUs of these. This one has 4 gigabytes of LPDDR4 memory, as well as 32 gigabytes of eMMC storage, which is really cool. I'm doing this all by memory, so I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job. Hopefully I don't get anything wrong, but the slightly cheaper version of this that also has the 4-core only has 4 gigabytes of memory, but it still has the 32 gigabytes of storage. And then the cheapest version, I think it's called the 216. Actually, their naming is pretty cool. 216 for 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigabytes of onboard storage, which that's what it has. And then the 432 and 832 are 4 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes respectively, and then 32 gigabytes of onboard storage. So model numbers are nice and easy to remember. But yeah, I have 2 of the 832s. So 4-core Celeron, 8 gigabytes of memory, 32 gigabytes of onboard storage. And then on the back of all of them, you have a 12-volt DC power jack, as well as 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports, mini display port, and then 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, which is pretty sweet. But the really cool thing, or things about this are, the design. It looks really cool. It has this passive heatsink. There's no fan or anything. And then on the front, the bottom, whatever this is called, there are 2 SATA 3.0 ports, so 6 gigabit per second ports with a power adapter, and they actually send with any of these, they send this single adapter, so you can plug in a SATA drive, so like a 2.5 inch. I don't think it can power. I doubt it can power 3.5 inch drives, but I haven't tried it actually. But it can power 2.5 inch drives like SSDs or hard drives, and there actually is. You can kind of see it over there. They have a dual SSD or dual SATA connector you can use as well, which is pretty cool. And then the main feature, the star of the show here, is the PCIe 4.0. Ooh, not that fast. Never mind. Ooh. PCIe 2.0 by 4 slot on here, which doesn't have a not unterminated. I don't know what that's called. It doesn't have the little piece on the end here, so you can put a by 16 card in here and it'll fit, but it just won't obviously work by 16. It'll be by 4. But yeah, PCIe, SATA, dual NICs. This thing has a lot of cool flexibility that you can use for different projects, and that's originally kind of where I didn't think this made sense because yeah, a PCIe slot is cool, dual NICs are cool, SATA ports are cool, but you can get all of that from, you know, an old PC with a $10 gigabit add-in card, and then you probably have more PCIe lanes and slots and more SATA ports. So I was like, well, you know, if you need that, just get an older PC. I mean, power draw maybe, but also it looks really cool. So like, okay, well, this could be like a really sweet little sleek looking simple home server, especially it's not PoE, but you actually can use a little adapter like this guy to make it PoE. And like, man, one cable coming to this guy, you know, putting it on a desk or on a shelf, like that's pretty sweet if you just want a simple home server, but it seemed a little overpriced. So it didn't quite make sense to me for a bit until I started really messing around with it. And where originally I felt like because of the specs of this, it didn't really fit a certain target audience. Now I kind of feel the opposite, that exactly because of these specs, I think this fits a certain target audience, or really two target audiences. I think this can do two things really well. The first thing, it just looks super cool, and then it also comes installed by default with CasaOS, which is really just a Linux distribution that I believe ICWell maintains, but it's actually pretty cool. And it's nothing crazy, but the idea is it's a really simple, just, you know, automagic home server distribution. Not automagic, really, more just like plug and play, but you can literally just turn this thing on out of the box, hook it up to your network, and go to, I think, CasaOS.local, and all of a sudden be on a dashboard and start setting up Docker containers and storage and SMB shares and things like that. And it's really easy and really simple for the most part. There's a few quirks and a few things that I'll actually talk about in a later video where I cover just CasaOS on this thing and how I think that's really cool. But yeah, I think this could be a great solution for, you know, maybe a relative or a friend who has heard about Home Assistant or Jellyfin, because you probably told them about it, and they want to do something similarly, but they don't want to have to go through some of the setup of, you know, some of the other less simple solutions. And so I think this could be really cool for that. And it does look really cool and it's simple, and I like that. But the other use case for this is probably in the title of this video. I feel like this is sort of a Swiss Army knife for the Homelabber. And hold on, I think I have, okay, this isn't actually a Swiss Army knife. It's a Gerber multi-tool. I'm not gonna get all these things out. I didn't think this through. All right, so this is my little Gerber mini tool that I have sitting on my desk a lot of times just in case I need it. This is not my best pair of pliers by any means. This is not my best pair of scissors. This is not my best file. This is not my best bottle opener. This is definitely not my best knife. Like, this is not the best of any of my tools, but it's, oh God, I just stabbed my leg, but that's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. This is not the, sorry, that broke my concentration. This is not the best of any of my tools by any means, but it's small and it's quick and it's easy. And that's where I think the ZimaBoard kind of comes into play. Because like I said earlier, I imagine a lot of you are thinking, I have an older, don't come at me. I have an older Lenovo something desktop. I just looked down and saw that has a fourth generation Intel processor and, you know, 3 PCIe slots. I can upgrade the RAM. I have plenty of SATA ports, networking, all this stuff. Why would I need this? And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you have that, but like I literally was messing around with 2 of these running different operating systems, different setups, different PCIe cards, and it literally took up like the corner of this desk the whole time I was working on those, because they're small. They don't need ATX power supplies. They just use little, you know, wall wart power supplies. And it was super easy to, you know, plug in a drive, unplug the drive, add in a new PCIe card, you know, run networking. Like, it's all right here, and it's really simple and just right at your fingertips, and takes up very little space and also uses very little power. And now you might also be thinking, okay, well, yeah, there's a lot of other things that use even less power and maybe actually have more performance because they're using, you know, newer 11th gen, 12th gen processors. And some of those may even cost less than this. There's some really, really affordable mini PCs that if you're just looking for something to run some containers or VMs and you want something really low powered, yeah, this isn't the best solution. There are better solutions for that, but those things don't have where you can just pop SATA drives in and out without having to open up the case, or they don't have PCIe, or it's not the same thing. And this isn't trying to be that. This is kind of being that, like I said, that Swiss Army knife, that multi-tool, where it's really quick and easy to just do things and play around with it. I honestly didn't put that much time towards this video. I probably should have put more, but I'm trying to like keep my schedule consistent. And I was within the matter of, you know, a couple of afternoons maybe, I was able to try out like a few different operating systems, you know, a lot of different setups and tinker with it and play around with it because it was just really quick and easy. And I think that's what makes the ZimaBoard really, really cool. All right, so for the most part, that's my thoughts on this, but so what did I do with it? Well, first of all, I messed around with CasaOS, and I'm going to talk about that in a standalone video because I think it's actually really cool. There's definitely some things I want to see improved, but I think it's a really cool idea, and so far it seems like they've maintained the distribution really well. So I'm excited to see what comes with that. But I played around with that. I set up some storage, some file shares, and then installed some containers, which I think I mentioned earlier are just linuxserver.io containers for the most part that are on their like app store. But it's still really cool, really simple. I installed Jellyfin, then made a few tweaks to the container so that I could use the hardware acceleration that's on this, because this does support QuickSync, and I was actually able to get hardware transcoding working in that container for H.264 and HEVC 4K video, which was pretty cool. Transcoding 4K video down to 1080p. So this handled it just fine. So yeah, this could definitely be used if you're wanting to mess around with some video transcoding for something like Jellyfin, for example. This also does do decode, 4K decode on H.264 and HEVC as well. So I haven't really messed around with it a ton, but this does handle like YouTube playback really well. If you wanted to set this up as kind of like a home media PC, which that's actually something I think is cool if you buy something like this to be able to run a lot of different configurations and kind of mess around and play around, and then you kind of figure out what you really want to do, and you're not using this anymore to try out different distributions, different operating systems, different setups. You can still really easily throw this in your living room as like a media PC, or set it up just to run some dedicated containers. Like you can do a lot of cool things with this after you're done sort of messing around. But speaking of messing around, I also installed Windows and messed around with that a little bit. It runs decently well. It at least is nice that you have that hardware acceleration for video, so playing things like YouTube was fine. I ran Cinebench, which it scored, I think, a 3 on average of 145, which wasn't bad at all, considering I think it pulled around like 9 watts at the time, maybe 8, something like that. So pretty low power draw. I did notice that it got a bit warm around that time, and I actually messed around with just throwing on an 80mm case fan to see if I could bring temperatures down, and I did bring temperatures down quite a bit. I think it went from like 55 degrees or so package temperature down to like 30 something. But that didn't really affect performance. It didn't affect performance at all. And I even went in the BIOS and raised up all of the power limits. And basically this thing isn't thermally constrained or power constrained. It really is just, it's what the CPU clocks are. And so unless you can overclock, which I don't think you can. I'm nervous I'm going to say that, but I don't think you can overclock this. I don't think the CPU supports it anyway. But yeah, you can't overclock, so it's really just limited to what it's limited to. So the heatsink works just fine, although it does get a bit warm to the touch, but it's not affecting performance at all, at least not that I could tell. I did try out a few graphics cards when I had Windows working, and I was able to get an R7 240 working just fine, and even played some games with it, although it's not a good gaming machine by any means, so don't buy it expecting that. It's just the Celeron no. I did struggle to get some NVIDIA cards working. I tried a GTX 1650, 1650 Super, and a Quadro K1200, and I couldn't get any of those cards to work for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. At first I thought maybe the K1200 was trying to pull too much from the PCIe slot, because even though PCIe normally can provide 75 watts of power in the slot, but this power adapter for these is only a 3 amps, 12 volts, so like 36 watts or so. So there's no way it's going to be able to provide the full 75 watts that some cards expect. So I figured that might be an issue, but even when running the 1650 and 1650 Super, which run off of a 6-pin power adapter, or from a power supply, that's why that power supply is back there, I still couldn't get those to work. So I'm not sure if they also pull some supplementary power from the slot and it was too much, or if it was something to do with the by 4 slot and those not functioning without being in a by 16 or by 8 slot. So I'm not sure exactly why those didn't work. I know Nova Spirit Tech did a video a while back with this, and he tested out a few different graphics cards and seemed to get some other NVIDIA cards working as well. So I don't think it's like an NVIDIA thing. It may just be, you know, your mileage may vary with graphics cards, but I don't necessarily think that's like the main thing to pair with this. I think it's mostly going to be useful for things like NICs, or if you want to add more storage or other interesting use cases that, you know, I don't even know of. I think it could be cool, and I may test out at some point. Where did I put it? I did get this Tesla P4 that I'm kind of excited to play around with a little bit, and so I may try that out, but I'm pretty sure this will try to pull 75 watts from the slot, so that probably wouldn't work. Now that I think about it, I'm just gonna pretend I didn't say that. But yeah, after messing around with Windows for a bit, I played around with Proxmox. I originally installed 7.3 and played around for a bit, and then I ended up running into an issue. I installed VMs just fine, no issues, installed some containers as well. And it was going pretty well until I tried installing this 4-port NIC, 2.5 gigabit NIC, and I'm not entirely sure. I could have probably figured out if I spent some more time, but I was having issues with this, and then once I did install the drivers, I still couldn't get it to work, and I actually couldn't get the original NICs to work at all either. So I kind of moved on. I also realized at that time that 7.4 had come out, so because I figured it would take about just as much time to try to find the correct drivers and reinstall those as it would just to reinstall Proxmox. So I reinstalled Proxmox with 7.4. I tried to install it on the built-in eMMC storage, but that failed for some reason. So I just installed it on an SSD and then played around with installing some new containers. I tried getting hardware transcoding working on an LXC container with Jellyfin, but couldn't quite get that to work. But I imagine if I tinkered for a bit more, I could get it working. But yeah, Proxmox worked just fine. You can, you know, you're going to be limited by the CPU power. This thing doesn't have a ton of horsepower, but it does support virtualization, so you can run some VMs, some containers, and PCIe pass-through, which is pretty cool. And then I also set up OpenMediaVault, and that I was able to install on the built-in storage. So I got rid of the CasaOS that was there, installed OpenMediaVault, and that let me actually set up this that's running back here, which has 2.5 inch 2 terabyte drives that I actually got when I did my Blu-ray ripping and streaming video a while back. And it also has a 2 terabyte NVMe drive on a PCIe adapter. And so I have the 2 drives set up in a RAID 1 mirror, and then the PCIe, the NVMe drive is just on its own file system. So I have both of those file shares working. I was messing around with it for a little bit. It's pretty cool. Like, it runs OpenMediaVault really well, and you could set up Docker containers and things like that. It is kind of cool. They did send, I don't know if you can see it. Okay, I'm going to try moving it really quick. This is a horrible idea. We don't need a network connection. This is dangerous. So yeah, it has this PCIe card, which is, you know, it's pretty cool. They also have these little machined aluminum rails you can get from
Icewhale
that let you put in, I think, up to 3 2.5 inch drives. I have 2 mounted in it right now, but it's a really simple, really cheap way to just kind of have these drives not just flailing around everywhere. You can kind of sit and be a little bit more stable. I lost my background. But yeah, so that thing runs OpenMediaVault super well. No issues. So I think that was sort of where I started to run out of time and wanted to get this video done. But I did a lot of just little tinkering, messing around in the BIOS, messing around with different cards, and it was a lot of fun, and it was quick and easy, and that's why I think this thing is great if you're just wanting to play around with a lot of different options and you need something that's not going to take forever to pull out of a case, or, you know. Yeah, it's quick. It's easy. Like I said earlier, it's what I would call the Swiss Army knife of your home lab. It's going to be really quick and really easy. So I think this thing's awesome. I think there's a lot of obvious passion with the company who's making this. They seem to really care about the self-hosted space and community, which I'm a big fan of, obviously. And so I think this is a really cool project that if you're looking for something where this makes sense, I think it's a cool thing to put your money behind. If this doesn't make sense for you, and it's a lot easier just to buy an older desktop you find used, that's great. Yeah, do that. Obviously, that's something I really enjoy doing and do a lot on this channel. And if you're looking for something super low powered and you're just wanting to run some containers and you don't really need PCIe, you don't need SATA, you don't need to do a lot of like trying different things out, there's a lot of cheaper solutions as well. So you know, if this makes sense for you, I think it's a really cool project, a really cool product. And yeah, they seem to be doing some cool things with CasaOS as well that I'll talk about later, like I mentioned. I don't like everything about this. There's a few things I don't like. First of all, it's been out for a while, so I can't really, it's a little tough, but the CPU is just a bit outdated. I think it's 6 or 7 years old at this point. And it's just not the most powerful thing. There's definitely better stuff on the market, but maybe there'll be a ZimaBoard 2 here soon or something like that. Also, PCIe is a big part of it, and some cards, like this, 2.5 gigabit NIC, they go on just fine. But then some cards, like this SATA card, they don't because of the little plate here. And so for a lot of these cards, you have to take this plate off to be able to get them to slot on here. I feel like this PCIe slot could be slightly further that way, or maybe this case can be, I don't know. I ran into that issue a lot. I had to take a lot of these plates off, and that kind of did slow down the process, which was a little frustrating. It also covers up the mini display port, but I don't know what else you could do. There's a lot packed on here. So yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. And then also, I don't really know what you would do about this, but because the PCIe heights are kind of vary, when you put this down on a table, there's nothing really supporting it. But then you'd run into the opposite issue if you had a card that was really thick. Then you'd kind of have it lifting off the table. So I don't really know, it's not that hard to just get a little piece of plastic and kind of wedge it under there to support it, but it would be cool if they kind of had some sort of sophisticated solution for managing PCIe card heights. I think that could be really cool, especially since like this thing looks so sleek and sophisticated. That would be nice. Also, for being something that you're supposed to like reset a lot and turn on and off, in my opinion, not having power and reset buttons is a huge pain. They do have, it's kind of hard to see, but there are some contacts here, some pads on the PCB where you could solder connections for power and reset. I didn't do that. I was tempted to, but just ran out of time. That would have been a really nice addition, in my opinion, to just have dedicated power buttons. And I think with how cool and well thought out some of this is, it's frustrating that there wasn't something thought out as well. Like I get the idea of maybe you don't want to have a button that's really easily accessible, or having something else drilling through this, pretty thick machined whatever metal this is for the heatsink would be tough. But like maybe you could put it on the bottom and then have this acrylic panel can be like flipped around, and in one position the buttons are exposed and then in the other position they're not. I think there could have been some, creative ideas with how to do that. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but I guess if you're going to tinker with this a lot, it might be worth taking these off and figuring out the pinout for this and just attaching some buttons to be able to do it yourself. And then my last qualm is less to do with like the tinkering and swapping stuff out, and more so if you were going to get this as like a really simple home server, because it does look super cool and I love it. And I want to be able to just have this, maybe even hook it up with POE or with the POE adapter, obviously. And just have it look super cool. But then you just have these like clunky drives hanging out of the SATA ports, and I think it just looks kind of dumb. So this is not SATA. This is obviously a USB. It's made by Cable Matters. We actually use a lot of these at work. I'm actually a pretty big fan of it. It's simple and it works really well. At least it has for us. It'd be cool to have something kind of similar to this that was like the same size and like had the same kind of aesthetic, and then just sort of had like a bridge that kind of like almost like NVIDIA SLI, something like that, like to have like a nice little bridge that just kind of like sticks on here. And that way you could like put 2 drives in there, put them in, a mirror, and have like a sweet little simple home server setup. I think that could look really cool, but it doesn't exist, which is a bummer. So maybe they'll do it. I don't know. It would be cool, honestly, to have like a ZimaBoard Pro in the future, which had like a better CPU, maybe like a full-length PCIe slot or multiple PCIe slots or NVMe, maybe. Like I think you could do a lot of cool things. Just obviously you're dependent on like the CPUs that are available in this spec. So I know that's tough. But it would be cool to have like an updated version of this that's very much like, like throw PCIe cards on it. 2 NICs, why not 4 NICs? Why not 4 SATA ports? Like I think you could do some cool stuff. And then also have like a Zima Mini that is just for, hey, this has CasaOS on it. Super simple. Or maybe Zima Home or something. I don't know. why am I branding for them or marketing for them? I don't know. It could be really cool to have something that kind of looks like this, feels like this, runs CasaOS out of the box, and it's just dead simple to like plug in. and then start installing containers and start setting up storage. I think that could be really cool. That doesn't necessarily have all the PCIe stuff on it, but yeah, I think that's about all I have. I want to say thanks to
Ice Whale.
I'm really nervous I'm saying that wrong for some reason. I want to say thanks to them for sending these. They actually sent both of these as well as a bunch of PCIe cards and stuff that I was not expecting. So huge thanks to them for sending that over. I'm glad I could finally take a look at this and mess around with it. And I didn't think I'd like it, and I actually think these are super cool, and you'll definitely see more of these in videos. So thanks to them for sending that over. Also, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you want to maybe see the follow-up video where I cover CasaOS and setting this up as a really cool, sleek, simple home server, get subscribed. And also, if you liked this video, maybe hit the like button. If you didn't, you're probably not here by now, but if you didn't, go ahead and hit the dislike button as well, I guess. But yeah, that's about all I have for this one. I will have links for these as well as some of the other stuff I may have talked about in the description. And if you want to go click on those, it does help support the channel. So yeah, make sure and do that. Go check out ZimaBoard. I think that's about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay curious, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. And then 2 gigabit, and then 2